So, what first motivated you to get into music?
Wow. Well, I was a music fan from the age of around 12 or 13. I went to boarding school from the age of 11. And when I was over in boarding school in the UK, I started listening to a lot of hip hop music. I've got two older brothers who were always listening to it when I was a little bit younger, but that's when I really fell in love with music. And then when I was 18, 19 years old, when I was in university, I wrote my first rap lyrics when I was traveling, and I got stuck in an airport in Paris. And it just started as a hobby, started out doing it for fun. And within a year of starting, I released my first album. So it went from being a hobby to becoming a potential career.
And a big difference between your music and that of most other rappers is that your lyrics are clean and inspirational. Why did you decide to focus on more positive lyrics?
Yeah, sure. Well, you often hear in hip hop and outside of it, keep it real and be authentic. And the most honest answer is because that's what's real and authentic to me. I don't swear in real life, so I don't swear in my music. I'm not a gangbanger. I'm not a drug dealer or doing all these type of things. So I was never going to put any of that stuff in my music because that would be the fakest thing possible. I've always just kept my music true and authentic to myself. And with so much music and other types of media out there with negative messaging, I think it's even more important to offer a semblance of balance. I don't think it's good if all that people are consuming is things with that type of potentially negative messaging. People are free to talk about what they want. Of course, I'm a massive advocate for freedom of speech, but I prefer to use my speech on all different platforms and any medium that I can in the real world or online to offer a message of positivity, hope, inspiration, and motivation.
And why did you decide to self release your music, and what tools and methods would you recommend to other aspiring artists?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm a big fan of the do it yourself ethos. This goes beyond music. This goes into every creative endeavor and also entrepreneurial activities. I think that people underestimate just how much that they can do and how much they can achieve independently. So I had that ethos from early. I always wanted to maintain creative control and business and financial control of the majority of everything that I work on and everything that I create. And that's something that I've continued on to this point. I've been doing music and other creative endeavors full time now for well over 10 years. And I've always just had that independent ethos. I don't think that you need other people's approval to make something big happen. Certainly not the approval of people at record companies or giant corporations or anything like that. In this day and age, especially, it's never been easier and more possible to make something happen by yourself. You already have access to the tools of promotion, distribution. You can build up a name. You can market yourself to millions of people without even spending a dollar. You can do it all organically. You've got all these different social media platforms. You can get your music out on iTunes, Spotify, whatever platform independently. You can get CDs, vinyl, any type of physical media made independently. You can put on your own shows, do your own tours. There's so much stuff that can be done without having a massive machine behind you. Now, if you want to be the next Justin Bieber or the next Rihanna or the next Beyonce, then sure, at this stage, you probably still might need a major label. But if you're an independent artist or any other type of creative, then if you have your entrepreneurial hat on and you learn how things work and you really most importantly, you connect with your audience and you find the people who like what you do and who are willing to support you financially and by coming to any type of events or following you online and sharing your stuff, whatever it is, if you can find those people, then that's the lifeblood of any artist. So that's how I've managed to do it independently. And it's how many other people are doing it.
And how do you see the music industry evolving, and what are some of the changes you believe that are important?
It's a good question. Hmm. I think that the traditional model is breaking down year after year. I think the days of the old school kind of record contracts where you could sign someone and just give them an advance and a record budget and have them trapped in something for many many years and full multiple album cycles, and then you're paying them 10% royalties, that type of thing. I think those type of contracts are increasingly going to be dead in the water. What I see is an increased democratization of music. So not just having sort of two levels of musicians, right? Just having your superstar musicians and your arena artists, and then having struggling, starving artists in the middle. There's much more of an increasing, you could call it a musical middle class that has been growing over the past perhaps 2 decades at this point, but perhaps really accelerated over the last 10 years, where you have artists who are making, multiple 6-figure, 7-figure incomes. I might not even know who they are. Maybe you've never heard of them. Our friends haven't heard of them, right? They're very niche, but they have those 100,000 plus fans. They've got those 1,000 true fans who buy everything, or they've got those 10,000, 100,000 fans, whatever it is that enable them to tour and sell their t-shirts and stream their music and buy their records, whatever the case may be. So I see more and more a higher percentage of artists and a greater number of artists falling into that middle class category, and the big labels increasingly losing their monopoly on the entire industry. And I think that's ultimately a good thing. In some ways, it's become harder to be an independent musician. In some ways, it's become easier. But I think if you take advantage of those tools and you think of yourself even beyond music, and you move and you just think of yourself really as a creative entrepreneur, then there's so much opportunity out there. And that's just going to continue to grow as more and more billions of people start to come online and use social media and all these other platforms.
And what advice would you give to someone who wants to start a music career?
The first thing I would say is hone your craft. I think oftentimes people put the cart before the horse, and they worry about building a social media following and getting on the radio and making expensive music videos and getting signed. They think about all that stuff before they've thought about actually getting good at what they do, whether it's rapping or it's singing or it's whatever the art form is, learning their instrument. So the first thing I'd say is just to get good at what you do. And then beyond that, what I would recommend that people do is to start small, build in concentric circles, right? So start with people who are close to you and around you, and build your audience from there. And then just be consistent, put stuff out there and see where it lands. Find the people who are embracing you from early and show them massive love. You have to remember that an artist fan relationship is not it's not a one-one relationship. If you've got 100 fans or supporters or followers, which by the way, those are all different things, then those are individual relationships, right? That's 100 separate relationships. It's not just the artist and then everybody else. So treat your fans and supporters well. Let them know that you support them. Give them ways to support you. Make sure that you do have something to sell. If people do want to support you, beyond just streaming your music or watching your videos or whatever it is, give them a pathway to do that. And then just continue to build. Be consistent. You have to persevere. Things take longer than people typically want to dedicate their time to. I think a lot of people expect things to happen quickly. Everyone wants to blow up overnight. So it's good to be hungry, but also be patient. Things take a long time, but if you continue to just build and you connect with people and you create a good product and service, then over the course of time, you will find your audience, and you just continue to build from that. Don't let anything discourage you.
And finally, what motivated you to start a podcast? And in your opinion, why are citizen journalism and free speech important?
Wow. Well, that's multiple questions. I think free speech is important for a whole ton of reasons. Perhaps the most important is because it's how we think, and it's how we are able to make sense of things, and it's how we're able to get to the truth. If you're not allowed to speak freely, then you're not allowed to think freely. If you're not allowed to discuss things, then how do we know what's true? And how do we know what other people's opinions are? And how do we build empathy and get to really understand the world? So I think free speech is important for all of that. I think it's just one of the most basic human rights and freedoms. And the reason I personally chose to start my podcast is to scratch an itch that wasn't totally being met by just being a full-time musician. So I went full-time with my music in 2011, and I started my podcast in 2019. I'm an intellectual person. I like having conversations and discussing all sorts of topics, both within and outside of music. So I wanted to start a podcast to give myself an opportunity to satisfy that. Podcasts are somewhat creative, but I find that it satisfies a different part of my brain than making music. I'm a very multifaceted person. I've got a lot of different interests. Obviously, I love music. I love hip hop. I love rap, and that's something I do. But I have a lot of interests outside of that. So having the podcast platform means that I can talk to some of the most interesting people in the world, and I can learn from them, and other people can learn from them. And it has some analogies to music in terms of the overall messaging. But I just want to use my voice to uplift, inspire, and motivate as many people around the entire world as I can. And that happens through different mediums, not just through my music, but also through my podcast, through my writing, through my social media presence, videos, all that type of stuff. So it's all in line with the overall goal.